editing reveals everything that production lied to you about.
Yes.
And I love that. I hate it, but I love it, right? We've all heard the quote, there's the film that you write, the film that you shoot, and the film that you edit.
Which feels like filmmakers are making 3 different movies, but actually they only ever release the film that they edit.
Which sure makes it sound like that one is the most important one. Welcome to Indie Film Podcast. I'm Victoria.
And I'm Chuck. We're breaking down the 7 deadly sins of low-budget indie filmmaking. So far, we've talked about dull scripts, woeful rehearsals, sparse art department, uninspired shot design, and distracting audio.
So today, we're covering what we think is the 6th sin, which I assure you I've always pronounced correctly every single time I've said that sentence today, lousy editing.
Let's talk about editing, Victoria. We kind of broke things down into technical considerations as well as artistic considerations. Do you want to talk about your technical steps when you start an edit?
I think I'm definitely more the technical editor and you're more the artistic editor, so that feels right.
Well, you do a lot more editing.
I'm
You do a lot more editing than I do, so you have a system.
And realistically, a good edit should have these technical considerations as well as the artistic considerations.
Yes.
You shouldn't choose one or the other.
Correct.
Okay, so technical considerations, just as a quick 6-point list, is learn your platform, organize your assets, plan for your final specs, assemble your film, get feedback, repeat assembly and feedback until a toasty golden brown.
I like that. You just
Because it's now a casserole, too.
keep revisiting it until that casserole's cooked.
Yeah, or you get real sick of doing it. Either one.
I dig it. Yeah, the quote, films are never finished, they're abandoned. And it's in the editing room that you end up abandoning your film. You're like, this is the last export, and then that's always sitting in the back of your mind, like, maybe I'll revisit this again someday.
Maybe I'll clean it up, make some changes.
And then it sits on your hard drive for like 2 years,
You
and
know
you
what?
just abandon it.
And you know what? You did enough. You got it through high school. You kept it alive. You did plenty. It can handle the rest on its own. Okay, do you want to go through the artistic considerations?
Yeah, the things that I consider for the artistic part of an edit are performance, continuity, pacing, and story. And it's the pacing and the story that always gets me on indie films.
Yeah.
If it's we're at a film festival and I watch a film that feels like it's a little bit in the mediocre department, I can usually attribute that to mistakes in pacing in the edit, and sometimes it's just length, honestly.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of indie filmmakers out there, and we've been to quite a few film festivals. Cut your film short.
It's okay to have a shorter film. It is okay to have a shorter film. I think maybe all filmmakers, myself included, need to look ourselves in the mirror every morning and add that to our affirmations list. It's okay to have a shorter film. Actually, I think if any algorithm whatsoever for this podcast would let us, I would just call this episode Kill Your Darlings.
Kill Your Darlings.
But I'm pretty sure that if we call it that, we will immediately be flagged and our channel will be shut down.
Yeah, we can't put that in the title for some reason. But so maybe we could talk about some of those darlings that we've killed and how you've decided to get rid of some of that stuff when you're editing a film. Do you have an example of something that you've ended up putting on the chopping block and why you made that decision?
I think it's actually really funny. It was a film I was editing for somebody else.
Okay.
And there was a whole scene that didn't add too much to the story, but it was really comedic. And it was funny, but it was a little bit leaning into kind of an inside joke, so it's not necessarily 100% relatable. It works.
Yeah.
It does work, but I just wasn't 100% sure that it was really, imperative to the story, I guess. So I went through and did another cut where I cut and tightened a lot of things. And to be fair, there were a few places where I really did cut it a little bit too short in some other conversation scenes, but I just cut that scene out completely.
Right on.
Just tossed it right out the window.
You got to get rid of anything that doesn't add to the story when you're starting out, I feel like.
Yeah.
And it might be an interesting scene, but if it doesn't add anything to what's going on holistically, I feel like it's better to cut it. And if you're going to make another film, I mean, it wouldn't be ideal, but to include those scenes again later on if they do fit.
Oh, yeah. Like, you can always reuse stuff. If it fell onto your cutting room floor, you can always pick it up, dust it off, write that into another movie. That's totally fine. You're allowed to do that. It's your stuff.
And you'll be able to shoot it better the next time because you already have experience shooting that exact scene.
And if there was something specific that went wrong during that scene that made it end up on your cutting room floor, then hello, now you know what to not do next time. You can fix it.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
great. But anyway, I did send that version off to the director, and he said no, and he wanted it back in.
Yeah.
So we went backward.
Hey.
It got longer again.
Well, and that's sometimes it's hard for people that are just getting started in film, I feel like, to cut those scenes out of their films.
Because they love it.
Yeah.
They love it. It's their darling.
Yeah, and there's also...
And I tried to kill it.
Yeah, there's actors to consider and performances to consider, and that's really tricky to balance that stuff out. But one thing that I like to think about in making those edits is, unless the film is the best it can be, those actors are not going to get any attention anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's better to make the film as good as possible, even if it is like a scene that ends up on the cutting room floor.
Which happens.
Sorry.
I know a lot of actors who were so excited about a specific scene because they had a really cool moment, or maybe it was their only moment in the whole movie or series or episode or whatever. And they were so excited about it. And then it comes out and they're not there.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit heartbreaking, but at the same time, you got to hope that you just wowed them on set, and now that means they can bring you back in for something else later.
Absolutely.
You'll be a better fit for something else later.
I actually have a little bit of a story about cutting a scene from a film. The first feature film that I helped produce with my brother.
Oh, yeah.
We cut our father's scene out of the film.
You cut your own father out of the film?
We had to, because it didn't fit the film.
Oh.
And that was a hard one to do. Because,
and your father didn't disown the both of you?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
But we just keep pushing that envelope every single time, every single project. We'll bring him back on. Yeah, so we've cut him like 4 or 5 times now. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
But that was it was a scene where, one, it didn't fit the story.
Okay.
Right? And it was just kind of this appendix of a scene, this tangential person having this conversation that ends up being a joke. And so didn't fit what was going on, threw off the pace into the film. And then we also had to ADR it because we got really bad location audio in downtown Boise. And so then the audio, I didn't know how to mix ADR very well at all at that point. And so it just sounded very janky and off. It was It was just a mistake from start to finish. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, the scene probably wasn't a mistake at the very beginning. It was probably like witty and clever and interesting still. And then obviously, got to highlight your dad. That's kind of cool. But then, I guess I can see that at that point, everything after that was just a slow downhill tumble.
Yeah, it's just got shoehorned in. And it is hard to do those things, but after doing it quite a few times, my favorite thing to do now is just to chop apart other people's movies.
Yes. And every time I'm having trouble with a scene or something just not quite working right, I always have this sneaking suspicion in the back of my head that what I've cut is too long. Mm-hmm. So I send it to you, and you cut my 60-second intro for Dive into a 15 to 20-second intro.
Yep. I shortened it by half.
You did. You cut that sucker in half.
Yeah.
And it got rid of one of my favorite shots and one of my favorite moments, but unfortunately, it did work better. And you just have to admit that. You have to accept, I loved this thing, and you can still love that thing, but the audience is never going to know about it.
Yeah.
And you have to accept that you love this thing that nobody will ever know about. Unless you get really, really big, and then you can release it as like a special feature on like a bonus content DVD or subscription or something.
There you go.
You could do something with it
bonus
one day.
Behind the paywall content.
Yes. That's everybody's favorite.
It is fun to chop stuff down and experiment with that. As far as non-linear editors, there's really no risk at going in and attacking your film. And I feel like when I did that intro cut of Dive that I recut for you, it was, how short can I make this until it feels way too quick and the pacing gets thrown off in the too fast category rather than too slow. And I feel like countless times we go to indie film festivals and I can only count on my hand like the number of films I thought couldn't be cut down. You know?
You're like, no, that one was tight. That one was perfect.
Yeah.
But those are the few and far between.
Yeah. Because we saw what in Damn Shorts that was like literally 60 seconds long.
I think it was just under 2 minutes.
It was super brief.
So
it's like,
short.
There's no way to cut that one any shorter,
but
really.
Wow, it was good. That one stuck with me. That one was really, really funny and really good and told a whole story in less than 2 minutes. That was so mind-blowing.
Yeah. Great. And those are the films that end up being very memorable.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of density rather than sparseness. I kind of want to chat about the Reddit comment that you ran into, which we don't usually talk about online comments on this podcast, but you almost entered an argument.
I did. I resisted the urge to say anything because that felt like a losing battle, and I did not want to do that. But I logged in just the Filmmakers, I'm pretty sure, just our Filmmakers on Reddit, and I'm just browsing and looking, and somebody says, "Help, my horror film's only 60 minutes." And then I'm pretty sure it was a horror film, or I decided to add that in my brain later. If you're trying to find this conversation, sorry.
Yeah.
So I read the details, and I was working on this film. It's like an 85-page script or something like that, or an 80-page script or something, and it just all cut together and shot together a lot faster than we expected it to. I'm getting the rough cut from my editor tomorrow, and they're saying it's around 60 minutes, and I need it to be at least 75, ideally 80 or 90 for distribution.
Yeah.
And then I'm getting ready to go in and type I'm so sorry to tell you to kill your darlings. It sounds like, obviously review the footage and make sure that if a moment does need to breathe, it can. But realistically, a 60-minute film that's really, really good is probably going to have a better shot at getting distribution. Wow, no. I was in the minority. I assumed that's what everybody would be telling them.
Yeah, it's like shorter's better. It usually, I err on the side of making it shorter until it feels like you cut something out that's important.
I agree. But everyone in the comments was absolutely positive that you weren't going to score a good distribution deal because theaters don't want to play an hour-long movie. And as a society, we've decided movies are 75 to 90 minutes at minimum.
Yeah.
And, up to 3 hours, which is too long. I blame Titanic for starting that mess.
Yes.
No, everybody was completely on the same page.
Yeah. Trying to tell him to extend a movie.
Yeah, they're telling him to go and film like a prologue and film an entire other scene, but like cut it in periodically throughout the movie so it looks like this other woven subplot line. And I'm like, why would you add to a movie if it's already there and it's already good and it's interesting? And apparently streaming networks are throwing fits. They don't want a movie. If people see it that a movie's only 60 minutes, people won't watch it. And I'm like, I cannot remember ever looking for a movie and seeing the runtime and thinking, that's too short. I don't want to watch that. Yeah. I have seen a runtime of over 2 hours and said, I will not be doing that today.
I don't have time for that this evening
that
because
is not happening.
I want to get some sleep.
Yeah.
No, I feel you there. That's it's having not seen the movie, right?
Yeah.
And assuming that it's decent at 60 minutes, why would you risk ruining it by extending it? Let's say that the movie's actually bad. Then let's keep it short. Either way, I feel like if you're adding length to a movie, you're just losing. I don't see a scenario where it's a win if you already have it diluted or you have it concentrated to where it needs to be.
It kind of, I don't know. It blows my mind a little bit that's the route. And I don't know. Obviously, anyone listening here, please chime in. Let me know your thoughts. But
comment if you disagree with us that it's better to extend a film and rather than have it be too short.
Or if you've personally talked to any sales agents or distribution companies that have told you your movie's too short, we don't want it. Because that would be very unsettling news
Yeah.
I've never personally heard of that, but I've also never worked with a sales agent, and I have very limited experience with distribution information.
Yeah,
So
likewise.
I could be so wrong. I would love to be more informed, but
Yeah.
I think it was just a lot of people trying to justify not killing their darlings.
Yeah.
what do
Wild
I know?
stuff. Hey, do you want to take a quick second to give some people out there a tip that you have? You have a time-saving tip that has to deal with editing.
My organizational hack, if you will.
Yes.
That's a very, very fun one, actually. I duplicate everything.
Nice.
And I know that doesn't actually sound like a time-saving hack because it sure sounds like you're just making a lot of extra work for yourself. But having redundancies in place is the best thing that you can do to protect yourself, especially in the middle of editing a project. So not only do I have duplicates of all the footage, specifically one stored somewhere on a hard drive, like just an old school
Mechanical,
HG,
mechanical hard drive.
External. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. And then all the footage on the SSD that I'm actively working on. And then all of the project files, because I duplicate every project file every day that I open it and retitle it with today's date. Huge
Time saver there.
Yeah.
Especially if you're using Adobe software.
Oh, man. And especially if Adobe's going to release an update, because they will. Yeah, it's pretty great. Anyway, so I keep a bunch of those. I keep those stored. The one that I'm currently working on also gets stored on the SSD, but a copy of it and all the previous ones are stored on my computer itself. And then there's a backup copy of all those stored in cloud storage somewhere where I can access them from any device, anywhere, forever.
I like that.
That's
super important. And to me, I started years ago saving a new project file every single day that I opened up the project. And I do want to say just 2 weeks ago, I was working on audio on a film, and this was Audition inside of Adobe Suite, and I saved the files every single day. I ended up losing half a day's work, but I didn't lose the entire project.
But not the whole thing.
But the actual file ended up being corrupted. And so I had to go through a combination of like autosaves and going back to the previous day. I didn't lose everything at least.
Which is good. Still a little heartbreaking.
It's frustrating that files do become corrupted like that.
They do.
If you only have the one working file, then
if something
can lose
happens
a lot.
to it,
you're
screwed. Speaking from experience, it's pretty delightful.
And it's happened to me on several projects. You know, usually when I was working for the tech firm where I did videography work, things would happen when the Premiere Pro would update or whatever. We'd have software updates, and then I'd have to go back and open up an old project, from years ago, and then try to edit it in the new one, and all sorts of janky stuff can end up happening.
It's not pleasant. It's not a good time.
Yeah.
But keeping your stuff organized, though I'll be honest, I might go a little bit too far with it. I even go so far as to like duplicate all the sequences.
You have so many sequences inside of your editor.
And so many bins and sub bins of keeping absolutely everything very detailed and very organized. I have an individual sequence for just the alignment of all the footage for my scenes, which is, just DIT, all audio and video for each shot and take being lined up. I only rename the footage inside of Premiere now, and I leave whatever identifying marker of the last couple of digits of the actual footage name on there, so that if something weird happens and I've got to relink all these files, it's really easy to do so, but I can still read it at a glance inside of Premiere.
Nice.
And then, I go through and duplicate all my sequences, and I just start with a number 001, and that's the raw alignment for scene 1, and then the raw alignment for scene 2. And I just go through that so that every single time I create a new version of any scene or full film compilation, then if the director comes back to me and says, actually, I really liked this scene from this version, I know exactly where it is. I can just go straight
Yeah.
back to it, grab it, copy, paste, done.
It's so important to be able to unwind changes that you make,
Yes.
because you never know if you're editing for another director, you never know when they're going to say, oh, actually, I like that thing that you did like 3 drafts ago.
Yeah, you had a different shot than like 3 drafts ago, and I think I just really want to have that shot back.
Yeah.
And you're not going to know what shot that is unless
Duplicate
you
the
saved
sequence
it.
again and then
That's it.
merge
Yep.
those shots. So what do
That's
you do to get through the difficult part of editing first, to just get that rough cut done as quickly as possible?
I don't know if I do this the right way. This strikes me as one of those things where, like, those technical considerations that we laid out
Yeah.
at the very beginning, I feel like that is a recipe. And then every editor is their own little chef.
Sure.
And they go in and make tweaks and adjustments and changes that fit their skill set, their kitchen, their whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, because of course I'm going to relate this back to baking
I like it.
because I like cake.
I like to think about food.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so the way that I like to do this is I still work in Adobe, and I know that's not ideal, but I got to tell you, I've worked on Avios, I've worked in Final Cut, and I've worked in Adobe. And you know what? At this particular juncture in life, I'm too old to learn a new system. I will not do it. I am old dog. New tricks are not for me. I refuse.
Take my monthly payment, Adobe,
They will just steal my soul slowly.
in perpetuity until I die.
Yes.
They're getting however much they charge a month.
Unfortunately, or until I have enough free time to actually want to sit down and learn DaVinci Resolve, which
Yeah.
I probably should find a way to do, but whatever. Okay. So my process for doing this
Yeah.
is I go through and I create those alignment sequences,
Yeah.
right? Where I've got all the footage and audio and every single channel, even the camera audio, everything is synchronized.
Yeah.
So I've got all the takes of each individual shot.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go through and find my favorites, and I take all of those and I create just a giant monstrosity sandwich is what I think it looks like.
Mm-hmm. So multiple video layers.
It's got so many video layers from different takes
Yeah.
and all the audio from every single audio input
Mm-hmm.
from every single take
Yeah.
of this particular and different shots. But it's
Yeah.
just for this one scene, and I lay all of that out so that I know what all my options are, and then I kind of treat it like a multicam sequence
Nice.
where I just play through, and when I'm starting to feel bored or I want to, like, my brain is telling me that I don't quite like this or something feels off or what can I do, then I start switching through all the other different camera angles and all the different performances so I can see where my options are as far as really solid performance and actually getting the story told and continuity.
Yeah.
I worry about pacing last. My rough cut, I don't care about pacing. I intentionally cut everything with a lot of extra breath.
Yeah.
And your rough cut's gonna look bad.
Yeah.
It's gonna look bad.
It's going to feel off.
It's gonna feel so weird. And there's gonna be audio from other tracks playing, and it's gonna be a
Yeah.
little off-putting, and you're gonna have to sort through that at some point. But just to get something on the page,
Yeah.
so to speak,
For sure.
I like to just have that set, and it lets me just view everything all at a glance. Unless you have a really impressive computer or you're only shooting 1080p, I would suggest using Proxies
Oh, yeah.
because otherwise you will not be able to switch between all those very quickly. If you've got Danny rolling with his red and you
Yeah.
got a lot of footage going.
Yeah. A lot of red 6K footage
Yes.
does slow my laptop down immensely.
It does.
It's not. It's hard to do. And if people don't know what proxies are, those are just lower resolution files
Yeah.
that you can play on your editing software that links to the original high resolution, high
Fidelity.
gigabytes of data,
Yes.
which we're all struggling with right now as videographers and filmmakers because RAM and SSD space has just become
Very expensive.
out of control.
It's very expensive and
For
hard
12
to
years
come
doing
by.
this, it's just one direction. It always got cheaper. And then all of a sudden, the last 6 months, it's just been painful.
Yeah.
Painful. I spend now just more time moving everything around,
Yeah.
trying to salvage. It's like, oh, here's a project that's really old. This is a 4 terabyte drive. Let me just wipe that out and then put some of the new stuff on there and be like, this project is being laid to rest finally.
To your point about abandoning your
Yes.
films earlier, right?
Yeah.
I have finally finished so many projects lately because I have new projects coming up and I need an SSD to shoot on.
Yes.
So I guess I'm done with this. I'm not doing any more edits to this project ever again because it's going to go onto this really slow drive and it's, several terabytes of data and I'm never going to take it out of there.
Yeah.
Never going to do it.
It's going into the library, into the archive.
Yeah.
So you make the rough cut, and then from there you smooth it out, obviously,
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about, too, is sharing your rough cuts with people and then taking their feedback and not pushing back about feedback.
Taking feedback is its own skill set.
What does that look like for you?
I try to find somebody who doesn't have skin in the game.
Okay.
Right? Not somebody who is involved in the film, not somebody who's a producer, but bonus points if they are in my target audience
Nice.
for this film. If I know that this film is geared towards mid-20s to mid-40s women, I'm going to reach out to my network and be like, hey, can I buy you dinner or a coffee in exchange for your time in giving me some thoughts on this movie?
Yeah.
And they're probably not a film expert necessarily because that's not really what I need. Right off the bat, what I need right off the bat is, does the story make sense? Do you follow it? And are you interested?
Oh, yeah. Good point.
That's what I want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And if they are, they aren't there. Or they're like, oh, actually, I was really into it until X point, and then you lost me.
Yeah.
Those are great
Until
places.
your movie went on for 3 more minutes than it should have. No, sorry.
Until your 8-minute short film became a 20-minute slog. No, I'm kidding. But those are sort of the things that I look for, and that's the most actionable feedback at that stage. And then I can send it off to somebody like a director, a producer, somebody who has a little bit more input and thoughts on it and can give me more of that detailed, creative, specifically direction on it. But at least then I'm also coming armed with some information in my back pocket about why I made certain choices.
Nice.
So if the director tries to push back on why something was cut a certain way, I can say, well, I did some initial...
Match on action wasn't there.
Yeah. Like the continuity wasn't there. They stood up in one take and it was the best take we had. And then they always sat back down in every other take. And nobody on set called that for some reason.
Yeah.
So I had to use the entirety of that one shot because...
That was it.
that was the only time they stayed standing.
Nice.
Or more realistically, at that point, even if it was the best performance, I'd say, sorry, we have to cut that best performance and move to the next best performance because all the other footage doesn't match.
Right on.
Sorry.
You've done a lot of editing.
I've done a lot of
You've
editing.
edited basically all of your own projects.
Yeah.
As well as a lot of other people's projects.
Yeah.
And in the realm of other people's projects, and we think about like Hollywood movies, and we give a lot of credit to directors and for their creativity, but a lot of times they don't actually edit their own films. Do you have any?
Sometimes they do.
For sure.
They can. And
might.
especially in the indie realm, you're going to see a lot of directors edit their own stuff.
Yeah, but like big time Hollywood directors,
Yes.
a lot of times they just hand it off to somebody else. And why do you think, Victoria, that editing is often an overlooked art form in Hollywood?
I think it's because editing is supposed to be kind of invisible and mostly women do it.
Yes.
Kind of fits with the invisibility theme there.
Right. There's a lot of women that edit
Yeah.
like famous films. I think we got a list here.
Yeah.
Right?
I appreciated that. You added this list and
Yeah.
I appreciated you doing it.
Verna Fields edited Jaws and American Graffiti. Thelma Schoonmaker, Raging Bull, The Aviator, The Departed. Marcia Lucas edited Star Wars.
Kind of a
Not
big deal.
George. And
No.
you can actually see an entire BTS like film. I think it's on YouTube. I'll try to find it and put a link in the description if I can. It's called Saved in the Edit because George Lucas had a really bad movie initially with Star Wars, and then Marcia saved it. And then Sally Menke, which is another famous editor that I'm partial to because she edited Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill, and basically most of Tarantino's films up until she died. So if you've seen like recent Tarantino films, if they feel different, it's because it's a different editor potentially.
I think that's because women are just better at knowing emotional beats. No, I'm kidding.
I have a quote here that I thought was pretty cool from Hilda Rasula. and she was editing. Oh boy, my tablet's acting up here. She edited American Fiction, and she says her job is about realizing the director's vision. Quote, "You're kind of a midwife to the film, you know? You're helping them realize that vision in the best way that you can and seeing it through to the very end until it gets boring."
Oh, that's really nice. I like that one a lot. I like that quote. I like that she equated it more to like a birth, though, and I'm going like the baking route. But,
Yeah.
You know, hey, we're all on the same page.
Buns in the oven.
Yes.
It's all about buns in the oven.
There we go. That's the title of the episode. I'm not allowed to say kill your darlings, but I bet I can say buns in the oven, and I bet that'll widen our reach
There
for
we
who
go.
clicks on this video.
Baking that bun. Do you have anything else you want to add about editing?
I actually, on your point about the feedback and
Yeah.
taking the feedback, I feel like you have a really good example from Stockton
Yes.
about that I do think would be really valuable for people to hear. Because there is this inherent need to be a little bit defensive about your work and kind of push
for
back
sure.
on feedback and learning how to tone that down and just accept the feedback graciously
Yeah.
and with compassion and understanding is important. So would you...
Yeah, so Stockton to Table Rock, we had screened this feature film. It's on Amazon Prime if you want to check it out. We had screened this feature film at a preliminary screening. It was like a private screening, and we got feedback from people, and we're like, something still doesn't quite feel right about the pacing on this film. And we sent it off to a friend of ours, and he gave us like some very solid feedback about a specific scene where the character goes to the hospital with her mother, and then she returns home from the hospital. He's like, that's not suspenseful enough. You need to leave the audience wondering if her mom is alive or dead. And so we didn't shoot the film that way. However, we then decided to try to fix all of that in the edit, it was a nightmare at that point because I had already mastered all the audio.
Everything's already done.
So yeah, everything was done. So we had to go back, drop in like 80 or 90 audio tracks, link it all up to the footage. And we basically changed the beginning of the movie, the entire beginning of the movie. The opening scene is different
different
than what was screened because we needed to use some of those clips later on. So we had to basically to leave the suspense, leave the audience in suspense. We had to do like a flashback scene instead, like in place of in the next scene. It's hard to explain this way, but
basically you had to add more timelines.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Threading out at more points.
Because we have no new footage. So
No.
we just had to reorganize. When you take one piece and move it into a different spot, then it kills the pacing. And so then we had to start reshuffling scenes. So like the first 30 minutes is completely different
Than the original
than
screener.
the original screener. Yeah, but it made the movie so much better. And I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before. When we played it again, like a year later, we went to Minneapolis, and some of our friends had flown out to Boise from there to see this original screener. They saw it a year later. They're like, "Oh, I don't know what you did, but it just played better this time."
And they can't put their finger on it because
Yeah.
they're not going to notice all the individual things. They're just going to notice, "Oh no, I was really into it.
Yeah.
Like this flowed in a really interesting way."
Yeah, and when it clicks,
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh my God, this is good." And that's one thing I wanted to say too. Like, there's an infinite way to edit a film badly, but usually there's only a couple of ways to take the footage that you have and make it interesting.
Yeah.
And the more time you put into it, the better it's going to get. And then often the more time you put in, the shorter your movie's going to get, ironically. So
That's very true because it takes a lot more time, effort, energy, and just general skill set to make a shorter film.
yeah.
But that still works and is still good.
Yes.
That's the important note there. Though I will say that I guess that's one thing that I do really like about editing too. If I can put one final note on the
Sure.
edit thought,
Okay.
is that editing reveals everything that production lied to you about.
Yes.
And I love that. I hate it, but I
Yeah.
love it, right? Because editing will tell you if your story really was weak.
Yeah.
It'll tell you if you didn't get enough coverage, whether or not people on set were telling you to get more coverage. But editing will tell you if it did or not. It'll tell you if you should have listened to the sound guy when he said, hey, that take was really noisy. We can't use it. Maybe you should have listened.
Yeah.
Like,
every single mistake comes into full focus at that point. Yeah.
It does. It
I
does.
like it.
And editing is...
You got to push through and maybe just edit something totally different if you end up hitting a wall.
We've had some featured filmmakers that ended up having to do just that, and they did, and they pivoted, and they were really happy with the results because they were willing to just try to pivot.
Yeah, it takes 2 seconds to duplicate a sequence and then just attack it from a different angle.
But definitely do duplicate it so you can go back to it if it doesn't work out.
If you haven't learned anything in this podcast, just remember to be able to retrace all of your steps always. And those files are so tiny compared to the size of the video that you have on your hard drive anyway. Just keep making more project files.
It's fine. That extra, 20 kilobytes isn't going to end your computer.
No, but it might save your butt later on.
It will.
Do you want to start us out on the featured filmmaker of the week, Victoria?
Absolutely. We have Daniel Herzog, the director of Beautifully Broken, a feature documentary exploring suicide, trauma, and healing through lived experience following one family's loss and the unconventional path toward purpose, resilience, and prevention.
And he says, I've had a pretty unconventional career. Right out of college, I answered a Craigslist ad for a touring production looking for a photographer and camera operator. Truth is, I exaggerated my photography experience to get the job, and that client turned out to be Moscow Ballet. That first tour launched my career and broke me in a lot of ways, but it also forced me to learn fast. I developed a deep understanding of photography and video production under real pressure in real time. Nearly 20 years later, I'm still working for the Moscow Ballet, and I'm now directing their national TV spots. And I think that's a really cool story to just... I'm one of the people that if you submit a resume to something, I'm usually totally fine encouraging people to exaggerate their experience because, ultimately, like, all they're testing is your interview skills.
That's it.
And if you have enough gumption and enough grit, you can probably get into a lot of situations and still be able to work your way out of it.
You could figure it out. You'll be fine. YouTube Academy's great. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It'll be wonderful. Just check out a couple of podcasts and see what they're telling you to do.
That reminds me of a time I did take on a job and I did have to specifically Google or search in YouTube how to learn After Effects in one afternoon. And you know what? I found a video, and you know what? I got the project done.
That's all it takes. That's it. That's enough. That's enough.
Well, if you want to submit to be featured filmmaker of the week, go to indiefilmpodcast.com/submit. And shall we succinctly say farewell?
I think so.
Bye.
Bye.